Ray asked me to show how to do some dimensional effects in Illustrator, so I'm going to quickly demonstrate a couple techniques here. Some of them are going to use the bevel and extrude 3D features in Illustrator. So for example, I created just this really simple bar graph here. If I then scroll up to Effect and then go to 3D, Extrude, and Bevel, from here I can tell Illustrator how much depth I want to be added to each shape. So I can change that by altering this extrude depth number. So you can make them kind of ridiculously thick and dimensional, or you can make it a much more subtle effect if you enter a smaller number. So that's a way to just kind of customize the depth of things. You can then use this, this cube here and click on it with your cursor and change the angles here to be whatever kind of angle you might want it to be. I think if you click on it and just move this around, I would still write down these numbers because there's a good chance that you might want other things in your page to relate to these angles. So if you start tweaking the angles or tweaking the perspective, like I said, just write down each of these numbers so that you can match it later. So that is one way of doing it. You can click OK once you're happy with how this looks. And then from here, you'll see if I click over into outline mode, it's still just the original rectangle. So if I want this to be permanently altered, I can go down to expand appearance. And then now when I go to outline mode, you can see it actually makes separate vector shapes for each facet of this. So I can now click on these and move them and alter them however I want. They're grouped, so you might have to ungroup them in order to start moving things around. But there you go. So that would allow you to change the color and change the placement of everything. So that's one option. That's relying more on Illustrator's kind of like built-in 3D features. Frequently, I would just tend to build this stuff myself from scratch. So here's an example of what this will look like. So really all I did here was I just made a rectangle and then made two adjoining shapes with slightly different tones. And if I click on this first shape and then go to Object, Transform, Shear, I can change these numbers here. So I want this to be sheared or skewed on a vertical axis at a 45-degree angle. I'm choosing 45 degrees because I want my two facets here to match up. So if I do 45 on both, then they'll match up for a 90-degree angle in total. So I can click OK here. I have Smart Guides turned on, so this will just kind of snap to match up at the corner here. And then I can do the same thing for this one. Object, Transform, Shear. I just now have to do this at a horizontal axis, and then I have to go to a negative number and then click OK there. And then now if I zoom in, I can match these up. So obviously I can change the depth and dimension here if I wanted to. If I, using my white arrow, select these points here and then hit return. If I change this angle to 135, 135 is because it's 90 degrees plus 45 degrees. And then I can just change this distance here, and so that way I can actually alter the depth of this however much I want. Obviously, these don't all have to be perfectly at 45 degrees. You can change the angles if you want. So let me click OK. The way that you would change the angle is if you just need to make sure that the two angles of this side and this side, make sure that those angles add up to 90 degrees. So if you alter one at 60 degrees, then you could alter the other at 30 degrees, and that way they'll still match up and complete a full 90-degree angle. That way, if you want to skew them at slightly different perspectives, you can do that. So that's a more manual approach. I typically do the more manual approaches whenever I work. I just don't trust technology, I guess. I don't know. I just don't like a lot of these effects because I don't feel like I'm quite as in control over everything. So that's a second option. Here is just a very simple way if you ever need to make kind of a dimensional cylinder shape. I'll show this in outline mode, and literally all this is taking an oval shape here and then duplicating that oval and then just changing it to a darker color, pushing it to the background, and then if I zoom in here and then make a rectangle, again, it helps to have smart guides on because it'll kind of snap to your point. So making it the right height and then bringing it over here, and then I just send that to the back, and now this kind of looks like a cylinder of sorts. So we can see what that looks like in outline mode. If I then want to combine that shape in Pathfinder, I can do that. And then if I apply a gradient to it to my right colors, or using my correct colors, then it'll give you a little bit of a sense of depth and dimension. So those are some pretty quick ways. If you have other specific questions about different shapes that you're trying to create, I can help you do that. A lot of it, though, is really just a matter of kind of understanding some, like, junior high level geometry principles, and then applying gradients to it in a way that feels kind of convincing. So hopefully that gives you started. If you have more questions, let me know, and I can kind of follow up with a more detailed demo.